All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alex Fajvosovich. I'm the head of fraud risk here at Unit21. I'm a fraud prevention practitioner for the past 16 years uh, with background in fraud operation analytics, building and designing fraud strategy programs. And today with Unit21, I head the fraud and risk department, working with my product team, with the customer success, and my go-to-market teams. My co-host for today is a good friend and our head of AI, Tyler Allen. Tyler, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, hello all. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Tyler Allen. I'm head of AI here at Unit21. I've been fortunate to work alongside Alex, I don't know, maybe the past 4 or 5 years now. I forget how long it's been. Yeah, I was actually the first hire as a software engineer at our company. So I've been here around 6.5 years. I've built a lot of our core case management, transaction monitoring product. For those that aren't aware, we focus on fraud and AML operations post onboarding. So that includes things like transaction monitoring, case management, government filings, customer risk ratings, sanction screening, device intelligence, you name it. But yeah, today we're really going to focus on our AI agents. I'm really excited to get in with it with Alex. My goal is that folks take away not only from Unit 21 perspective how we're thinking about it, but have some general principles around what is AI, what are all these buzzwords, what do they mean tactically for your organization, and then how to either deploy them with a service like us or to test some things out on your own. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, we have a great agenda for you folks. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. So this session is being recorded and will be shared with the audience in the next 24 hours. We will hold a live Q&A session right at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A button at the right-hand side of the screen, and we will do our best to answer all of the questions as they come in. If you have any technical issues or difficulties, please scroll down to the FAQ section of the screen. There's some helpful resources over there to help you overcome any technical issues. And while you're listening to us, there's also a handful of resources for you under the resources tab. So feel free to go ahead and click those links. But without further ado, I think we're ready to start. So AI agents, right? Everybody's talking AI. AI is the biggest buzzword in the industry, but why AI agents matter now and why they are matter for compliance and risk people like you and I. So you know, let's look at our industry. And while our industry is fairly young, I think we've seen a lot of technological advancements in this industry. So from manual and paper driven investigations in the early pre-2000 era to rule-based transaction monitoring system. Then we had deeper analytics and early machine learning initiatives in the 2010s, 2020s. But really, in those 40, 50 years, the way we investigate AML, the way we investigate fraud changed tremendously. So if you look at the numbers, and if you work in the industry, you know that financial institutions spending a lot of money to make sure they stay compliant. They're spending a lot of money to make sure that their fraud operation programs running as smoothly as efficiently as they can. But at the end of the day, if we look at the numbers, only 2% of illicit flows are actually being detected by traditional or operational programs and strategies. And I think this is why one of the reasons AI is really matters, especially today, simply because we are dealing with more data, with more transactions, more customers. Everything is digital. We have way more channels where customers, interacting with us. We have way more channels where customers using our financial services in terms of different transaction types. So it's much harder to create a really orchestrated operational program rather than it was 15 or 20 years before. Now, you ask yourself, well, what is the impact of AI agents? And I think the end and the bottom line is really productivity gains and efficiency of how you run your programs. If we look at a report that was published not so long ago by McKinsey, so they look at how AI is already being adopted in different financial institutions, and according to them, there's productivity gains between 200 and 2,000% of financial institutions who switch fully or partially in adopting AI agents for their investigation and operational efforts. But really, things like faster resolution, consistent and reputable analytics, and better accuracy and flagging true risks are what's dominating the market so far. We look at our numbers. So while our AI initiative is fairly new, we already have more than 100 customers, 100 financial institutions who are adopting our AI tools. And as you can see on the screen, the numbers are very impressive. I mean, more than 9,000 alerts reviewed, over 100,000 tasks automated, 99% of accuracy in terms of the AIs and what they recommend and the end outcome of the recommendations, and 90% reduction in handle times. Tyler, I want to ask you from the early adopters of our customers, what is the most surprising task that you've seen being performed by AI agent to you?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And right as my leaf blower is outside, so sorry for any background noise. But I think for me, some of the things that are really interesting is I think maybe the behavior deviation task that I will kind of demo in a minute, or the counterparty risk analysis. So these are a little bit agents focus more on transaction analysis, and something that takes quite a bit of time to look at historical transaction activity, understanding how volumes, people they're sending money to, types of transactions, counts of transactions are changing over time. How that is a pretty comprehensive, time-consuming task otherwise, which can just be done more effective with AI, and it's already all there done for you. So I think, outside of Unit21 in those first two slides, I think when everyone thinks about AI, they really gravitate towards efficiency gains, which of course they're there, and certainly, huge business ROI to be attained from that. But I think that first slide, when it talked about, the percentage of illicit funds that are actually captured, which only being 2%, I actually think AI has the capability to kind of fundamentally change our whole industry and make it more effective. So it'll be a tool to actually have a more effective AML program for regulators over time, rather than something scary that's really just making things more efficient, but not necessarily more effective. So I think that's something I'm really excited about.
I really love your approach of making things more efficient, and I think it's actually it speaks to a higher level, because at the end of the day we are here and we are doing a job, not just to protect our financial institutions where we work, but actually to protect the people who are we serving. And at the end of the day, if we can capture more illicit activities, and if we can capture more money laundering, if we can prevent more fraud from happening, I think for the great of good, we are doing a much better job, and AI can definitely help us here. But let's move forward. So I think to understand AI agents, it will be helpful for us to understand the core technology behind them. And I'm sure all of the audience heard the term LLMs, or large language models, but what they are. Tyler, would you care to be a bit technical and explain to us what are LLMs?
Yes, I'm going to give a little bit of background and a loose technical definition of this, and I'll give some like real world examples how you should think about them. Really, the goal is not to scare anyone here on any sort of like technical nuance, but get folks comfortable and grounded, and not be scared of these different terms, and be more familiar with what they mean practically for AML and for fraud. So large language models, these are generally started to come up in the late 2017, when neural network transformers were essentially invented. And this is when kind of the first GPT models came out, but they still weren't super effective. And then ChatGPT, I believe, launched in 2022. So this is when these models really took off. And what they're good at is actually predicting the next text, which sounds complicated, but really all it means is Alex and I are having a conversation. We're kind of doing that as humans, right? Is Alex asks me a question, I take in that question, I use my brain, I process it, I return him an answer. So that's why, they're very human-like in their reasoning and their capabilities in terms of understanding text, understanding nuance in conversations, and giving thoughtful output. So they're useful in fraud and AML for narratives, investigations, analyzing unstructured data, etc. And the way I like to think about it is think about, you have this new best friend that is a PhD in every topic possible. Actually, I think the latest Grok model got PhD scores in every possible field. But you still need to ask them the right question. So I'm a bit of a sci-fi nerd, and I really like Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I always think about, they had this big computer for folks that haven't read it, and it was looking for the answer to life in the universe, etc. And the answer was 42. And it crunched, for millions of years, and it spit out that answer. And people realize it's the question that matters, not the answer. And I actually think fraud and AML practitioners are in a better position than ever to leverage AI and LLMs, because really it's about the questions you want to answer. So even if you have a friend that is a PhD in all these different subjects, they very likely don't know a ton about your domain, your individual investigation. So really having that good discourse with an agent that is smart, is intelligent, and giving them the right context to give you the right answer back is really the right way to think about it.
So what you're saying is basically that I need to be more prescriptive than just saying, hey, AI agent, help me find fraud on my program.
Exactly. And as smart as they are, as much as you can break it down very simply, give examples like you're talking to your parents or your kids, so that they know exactly, what good looks like and what bad looks like.
That's great. Thank you, Tyler. So let's look at the difference between those LLMs and traditional machine learning models. Now, if you've been working in this industry, you know that many financial institutions have been adopting more traditional machine learning models in the past 15 to 20 years. Now, while those models are great, and usually they provide an output which is a risk score, and in the context of risk and compliance, we will say the higher the risk, the higher the probability that the transaction, the activity, or the entity is either involved in money laundering or fraud. The way I see it, one big problem with traditional machine learning models is that in order to run those models, you need to have a very consistent and structured data. Either it's your transactional data, your customer data, the events that you have in your financial institution. Everything needs to be structured, and it takes a lot of time to develop those machine learning models. Now, on the other hand, I really love your example, Tyler, where you say, imagine you have a friend who has a PhD in every subject. So what is the advantage of LLMs versus traditional ML models? And should LLM replace machine learning models, or maybe they complement each other? What is your opinion?
Yeah. So I think this confusion comes up all the time. So, and it makes a lot of sense because, I mean, Alex, how long have you been using traditional ML models in fraud and AML? I guess when did you first start? What's your history with that?
I would say my first introduction to ML was when I was a fraud analyst. So that was, I want to say, 14 years ago. And it was just an output. It was a black box, and it was a score anywhere from 0 to 100, without you having any ability to understand what the score means. You only knew that if the score is high, it's probably fraud. But that model wasn't efficient at all. I remember as a as a fraud analyst working anywhere between 300 to 400 alerts every day, and the rules that were heavily reliant on those scores were generating anywhere between 3 to 5% of true positives. So how come the score is so high, but we have over 90% of false positive alerts generated? It was very mind-boggling for me personally. But now, after so many years in the field, I understand how those models work and why they need to be actively tuned and trained on a very structured data. So overall, very bad experience with traditional machine learning models. But yeah, I mean, how, in your opinion, if I'm coming from that space, and I'm sure many of our audience coming from that space where they rely on the risk score, what they can expect in terms of maybe explainability or even understanding the recommendations that the AI agent give, what sets of expectations they should have there versus just looking at the score?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, how I think about it and breaking it down, really the core difference is, traditional ML is typically a black box, as you mentioned, and works really well with structured data. So, very, labeled data. I'll give an example. At Unit21, we have an ACH risk score that's specifically looking just to predict R10 returns, which is like an unauthorized ACH, which is one of the more painful ones. Now, that works decently well because we have this R10 label from Nacha. So we get that label. ACH transactions are relatively standard. But as you start adding in more nuance, like say there is a message in the ACH transaction, like a transaction description, it's harder for machine learning models to understand the context of that message. What does that mean? Is this a scam? As new patterns come up, you have to retrain these models to give you a score that may or may not be consistent. Now, the nice things about them is you can do things like back test, really prove out that, hey, this score would have flagged XYZ as I improve and train scores, right? But they're pretty heavy and they're very use case specific. So, I would think about ML scores of, as kind of like an entry point into something that you might want to flag. And then LLMs as doing that kind of dynamic investigation. It can infer more context. It doesn't necessarily need to be trained on your exact data set or structure. Very much like a human when it looks at some messy data, but again, like a PhD level human, it can really infer a lot of context and do things dynamically. As an example, LLMs, given the right tools, which is a term we won't go too into, but essentially this is just things like making an API call to write an email. That's something that an LLM can do. They can pull, online research and get up-to-date facts. They can analyze different transaction patterns and compare them to what the entity has done previously versus traditional ML. Right? In theory, you could train some models to do some of those things, but likely those aren't good use cases. Versus like, as I mentioned before, that really ACH transaction, is this risky or not? That's a good place to start your investigation. Then you're probably going to actually do that investigation where LLMs can actually replicate, human-like labor. So I do think they complement each other. ML can be quite good for alerting and narrow use cases. And then LLMs are much more broad use case, and they're really good for different dynamic tasks, e.g. investigations.
Thank you for explaining that to us. Now, I know that there's a lot of big players in that industry, and I'm sure that we as consumers already familiar and use some of them. I believe ChatGPT is probably the famous one. But can you maybe shed some light on other players that people here who listening to us should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, absolutely. So the point of this slide is these folks are what's called foundation models. That just means that they are the actual large language models that most people interact with, including Unit21. So either when you use a large language model directly or you work with a vendor, very likely they're going to be using, one of these major players. There's a few others in the space, but you'll see OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Meta, XAI with Grok, and they all have their different flagship models. So you hear ChatGPT, and there's actually different versions of these. These providers provide different models for different use cases. As an example, ChatGPT has like what they call like O1 or O2 or O3, I believe that is now out, reasoning models, which take longer time to process, but are good for tasks that you don't mind taking a longer time and you want more complete review. Or they have mini models that run really fast or a little bit cheaper, more performant for easy tasks. So each one of these vendors I would explore interacting with. I'm pretty sure you can go to all their websites and very much like ChatGPT, if that's the only one you've used, kind of test them out, see what they're good at, see what you like, swap between different models. But I think it's good to generally like educate yourself on the major players out there, and also outside of performance. How's it doing in terms of giving a response? I think things like security policies, do they train on your data or not? And all these things are worth considering and evaluating. At Unit21, we use Anthropic, and we use a mix of different models there. So Claude is one. We use some mini models sometimes called HiQ. Sometimes we'll use some reasoning models. And yeah, so based on the task, and I'll kind of get into why we pick different models for different use cases. But it's good to know, because some models across these providers, even within the provider itself, will perform better or worse on certain different topics.
You mentioned earlier that AI or LLMs compared to traditional machine learning models are better in understanding the context. And I know that you are a big fan of this term we're about to discuss, what we call RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. Help us understand RAG in the context of compliance and risk.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is maybe, for whatever reason, because of this three-letter acronym, one of the scarier terms that you hear, but it's really not scary at all. As you mentioned, Alex stands for retrieval augmented generation. But a really simple example I like to give is I ask Alex, when was Thomas Jefferson born? Maybe he might know off the top, but he's likely going to go do a quick Google search and then give me the answer. That's RAG. RAG is just retrieving data to the task to actually give you an answer. So in our space, it happens on every single alert review, right? Or every single time you're going to use one of these large language models or these different, AI agents, essentially, right? Because at that point in time, when they're doing the review, if you're on an alert or they're helping you tune a rule, right? They need access to the right data to do that. So as an example, if you wanted to do an adverse media search, that's RAG. If you want it to then review your transactions, that's RAG. And I think the important thing to think about, whether you're working with a vendor or you're doing it yourself, is what data do I need my AI to have access to perform the tasks that I need to do to kind of automate my workflows for me? And how can I set it up so it consistently can access that data in a way that I can audit and make sure that it's correct? So I think someone asked a question in the chat about achieving high accuracy. This is one of the foundation principles, right? Is you want to make sure that your AI has access to the right data, and not I'd say like just a dump of every data element could ever need and then say, hey, go figure this out. You really want to be tight with, here's the exact thing I want you to do, here's the data to support this, here's what the output should look like. And that'll really help you achieve those accuracy rates, because at least you're ensuring that it always has access to the right data to give you the answer that you're looking for.
Yeah, and for folks here on the call, I want you to imagine, I'm sure that in your respectable financial institutions, you have training programs for new employees, whether it's an AML agent or a fraud prevention agent. There is sets of trainings that you will have the agent to complete before they go and they take, either the first line of defense or the second line of defense, whatever that is. So in those trainings that you already have in your financial institution today, you teach the agent, if they start to investigate a case, who are they investigating? First, they're looking at the entity. Then they look at the historical activity of that person. Then they look at what alerts have been generated previously. All those instructions that you have today built in your training programs would essentially transform into RAG. And if you can replicate the same instructions that you give to your human agents and have them apply those instructions to AI agents, this is where you will probably, as Tyler mentioned, achieve very high accuracy because the LLM concept, that understanding the contextual problem, is actually much more efficient when you give them a very, very specific directions and instructions. So thank you for explaining us what RAG is. Now I will give the stage to you, Tyler. I think if you can help us understand better of, at the end of the day, I think we are all scared about the quality of the investigation, about the quality of the recommendations. Walk us through what is important to understand here when starting to deploying those AI agents.
Yes, definitely. So For some background context, I believe quality is one of the most important things for our industry, because you don't really want to, close out Alex's account by mistake, or let Alex through and he's a fraudster because the LLM hallucinated. I feel like in other industries where you see AI really taken off, things like coding tools, or you'll see, vibe coding is a big thing of making your own websites. Yeah, it'll get it wrong, but it'll self-correct. If it's wrong, your website doesn't work. It's not that big of a deal. If we're wrong in our industry, it is quite a big deal. So that's why we really focus heavily on quality. And so outside of RAG, really, it's like, can you get the data to the AI consistently for the work that it needs to do? Here are two very important concepts. One is prompting and one is eval sets, and they go kind of hand in hand. So I'll start with prompting. Very basic. I'm sure everyone in the webinar today has used ChatGPT, one of the AI tools. Every time you interact with it, that's quote unquote prompting. Now, I'm not going to go into a whole class on how to do prompting effectively, but I think the main thing that matters the most is, can you prove it? And that's where it goes to eval sets and testing. So this is an important concept when you start working with different LLMs or different vendors and asking about this. But essentially, this helps you ensure accuracy. So I think some good examples I like to give is, you'll hear about new models come out from ChatGPT or Anthropic. Then you have Elon Musk coming out with Grok, and he says it's better than any other model before. How do they actually objectively say that? How do they measure this? With a form of eval tests. This is essentially testing the AI. How accurately at scale does it perform these different tasks? So to ground this in like some fraud AML examples to make this real is, hey, on this alert review, I want you to review previous transactions and look for signs of behavior change, as an example. You would run that with different data sets, maybe a few hundred times, with the same prompt against your different LLMs and different models, right? You can float between Anthropic, ChatGPT, et cetera, and see what performs the best. You'd essentially have ground truth on, hey, this is accurate, this is not. You would flag when it's inaccurate, and then you would tune the prompt or change your model until it's producing high quality results at scale. For you all, think about it like this. Every time, in Unit21, and I imagine, other tools and systems, you do things like back testing before you deploy a rule to verify that it's working correctly. Very similar. Just the only difference is you're not tweaking a rule parameter. You're likely tweaking the actual prompt that you're giving to the LLM, or you're changing the LLM model in general. So I think these are two cornerstone concepts where it's, what are the instructions you want to give to the agent, which you want to be specific about what you want it to do, give it examples of the output that you want, and then how can you test that effectively at scale? And really, if you kind of nail these three core concepts of RAG, making sure it has access to the right data for the task you want it to perform, it has access to the right prompt, meaning it has the right instructions to how to perform the task, and then you've actually tested this. So this is eval sets.
Thank you, Tyler. So now that we have a better understanding of RAG and how to prompt and how to actually test that the results are accurate, let's start and go a bit deeper into what Unit21 actually does in the space of AI agents, and how Unit21 custom AI agents actually work, and how they will fit in your compliance and risk programs. So our agents overall are built on agentic AI, meaning that different agent capable of autonomously executing end-to-end tasks that you will define as a human oversight. And you can easily configure all those different agents, and there is no need for you to deploy or write any code. Tyler, would you want to elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, so all the kind of concepts that I mentioned before, which is RAG, then prompting, then eval sets. As a vendor in the space, we do this all for our clients. So I'll kind of walk through what this looks like. But essentially, it looks like we allow them to easily kind of select the data that they're looking for, where we have the AI configured to access that data, analyze it correctly, toggle those things on and off really easily, and then select the alerts that you wanted to review, and just deploy it. So it's very simple with Unit21. But the core principles are relevant whether you work with us, anyone else, roll your own. But I think the nice thing about working with us or another vendor that has things out of the box is they've kind of done the heavy lifting and all this work. And really, it's just about getting them the data, and they'll kind of make it happen.
So really, our approach is when it comes to responsible AI is accuracy and oversight equals trust. Explain to me, please. I understand the accuracy side. You already explained us the technical terms of that. How does the oversight comes in this equation?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you'll hear this term, which I think is kind of a funny term that we are here now, which is human in the loop. This is an important principle for Unit 21 to make sure everything is very auditable, explainable for third-party regulators. So you'll see this come through in the demo. But as you think about this, the general concept is, what are your policies on AI? What do you want it to fully automate versus, you hear the term augment, meaning there's still a human taking the final action. It's just kind of teeing it up for you and verifying. So I think that, is an important principle. For us, we also use a general concept of, and this is kind of going back to eval sets. We don't have it on a slide today, but you'll hear another term called tracing. And all that is for each AI input and output, we log that to a database and store it. And we actually have another LLM, it's called LLM as a judge, is the overall concept, rate the input and output of that agent. So we essentially have a two-eyed quality review set up with our agents to then notify us if anything is off or incorrect. Of course, for you all and for in general, right, you want to really focus on that human in the loop part of it. At what point do you want AI to do the work versus, at this point, I'm going to have a human come in and this is our policy. And then for us at Unit21, we of course support that in our product, but we also want to be notified proactively if anything is going awry with our agents.
So what can you expect if you choose to deploy AI agents within Unit 21? Here we have a list of examples of how we have customers already using different AI agents for different tasks. And the beauty about it is that our platform allow you to customize each and every agent and which task they will execute. But I think maybe it's time for us to stop talking and actually show a demo of the product. What do you say, Tyler?
Yeah, let's do it. And
Right.
I do want to also say that if you're a Unit 21 client in here and this hasn't been enabled for you yet, it's actually on as of this morning for all of our clients that haven't opted out of AI in your production environments. So go check it out. There are two kind of new permissions. We're very sensitive on who can do what in our platform, but just look for those AI agent permissions, ping your customer success manager, but this is on for you to start using and testing if you'd like. So I'll share my screen and kind of walk through some simple examples. All right, for those unfamiliar, this is the Unit 21 dashboard. There's a lot you can do here with, building your different rules, doing case management, as I mentioned, kind of a comprehensive platform for both fraud and AML post-onboarding. We have this new section here called AI. And a big philosophy at Unit 21 is we want to give people the control and the ability to customize and tailor things to their needs, rather than having been a solution that you have to really fit into what we offer. And so here you can see I have a few different agents. And really the general thought is you can create as many different agents as you want, assign them to different queues, assign them different tasks, give them different instructions. So I'm going to walk through a couple of the agents that we have here as an example today. So we have our transaction monitoring agent, our TM agent, and it's reviewed 74 alerts. So we're going to spot check some of these outputs. But for us, building agents is as simple as kind of turning these things on and off. And this is what I mentioned before, where we've done a lot of the prompting and RAG for our clients over kind of common use cases. So you can see here, very easy for your AI to analyze previous alert activity, previous case activity, previous SAR activity. This is a really good example where ML and LLMs work well together, which is analyzing the actual alert score, which is an ML-powered score of is this going to be a false positive or true positive, and adding some explainability to that. So what are the top inputs to this, something that, the investigator can actually usefully use. And then this is where you do the assignment for the agent. So what's nice about using a provider like Unit21 is you can do things like, manage all of your workflows here, assign different agents to different queues, and configure things like auto reviews. So we're big on, long-term, we really want to automate flows for folks that are, interested in doing that. And so that means that we don't necessarily want folks to have to wait and interact with an AI on every single investigation. We want it to all be done for you by the time you get there. So I'll quickly show an output of what this TM agent looks like. I'll show a couple examples, and then I'll show a couple different agents so you can get a flavor what the variety looks like. So we'll go to this alert. And previously, and you can still do this, of course, this is a Unit21 alert where you can conduct a full investigation, look at things like prior activity, transaction analysis, network analysis, look at our proprietary consortium to look, is there any first-party fraud hits? And essentially, our AI agents sit on top of this alert, and we'll do two things. So one is automate these tasks, which you can see here, the individual output of it. So this particular task is analyzing all historical rules that have ever flagged for this entity. What is their purpose? So what types of behaviors are they, exhibiting? And what are their escalation rates? So you can see here the frequency of ACH transactions associated with the entity is 4 or more in a 4-month window. And actually, this has had a 100% alert to case ratio. So quite suspicious just from this rule that it's been flagged for before. Then we can look at, what was actually flagged, all the previous review history. In this example, no previous alerts, which we saw down below. There's actually quite a bit of previous cases, though, for this entity. This is dummy data, but this would be quite a risky entity. And then any previous SAR filing reviews. And then this all goes into the narrative draft created by this agent. And as I mentioned before, we're really big on auditability, explainability. So you can see here, this is created by our AI agent, 12 days ago. But if I, put in an edit here, you'll see that, we'll kind of audit that the agent created this, and think about this as kind of the human in the loop policy. The agent's really just making the draft for you, and then you can adjust as you see fit, and then we'll audit all of that, including in our actual audit trail. And this particular agent is also looking at account risk. Think of this as inputs that go into a customer risk rating model. So things like geographic risk in the US. So this particular entity actually is located in a high intensity financial crimes area. Evaluating account tenure, is this an old account or does it have an established relationship? This will call out it actually does have an established relationship. And then verifying customer age for signs of elder abuse. And this is one of the tasks I mentioned earlier, sections transaction analysis, where it's looking for things like behavior deviation, counterparty risk analysis, which previously takes quite a bit of time for an investigator to do. They might export the transactions, run some pivots, et cetera. This is kind of all done for them by the time they get to the alert. So you can see in this particular example, they had no transaction activity for quite some time, and then it spiked to 12 total transactions worth 21,000. But it's saying, maybe this isn't so bad. This is just an initial account activity for this relatively new business. Now, what I think is interesting is pairing this with a counterparty risk analysis. Okay, so, that person's transactions, maybe they're just funding their account and just starting their transaction activity, but who are they actually sending money to and what types of transactions? So you can see here, this is broken down by transaction volumes, transaction counts, types of transactions. So a lot of different ACH debits to these varying accounts. And it looks like it's, only outgoing funds. And actually a lot of the counterparties that they're receiving money from have been flagged previously in Unit21. So just this, task itself is giving us some good, key risk indicators on this flagged account. And these are just, what we're thinking about is high quality inputs into the overall narrative write-up and the whole review. So, that's just one of many things the agent is doing on this particular review. Now I'm going to hop to an example that has some online research results can see, oh, that was the same example. I'll go here. So another kind of popular task, I know you asked about this earlier, Alex, is online searches. So we integrate with Google Search to perform this and do an adverse media search. So you can see here that Dmitry Olov was identified for OFAC sanctions advisory in April 2025. We link to the actual sources. And of course, again, this is all will be included in the actual narrative write-up and used as like a recommendation, etc. All right, I'll go to the final two agents here, which are much different. I just want to show this from the variety of different agents you can build here. So this sanctions agent, and I'll show the 314A1, is relatively simple, right? It's just doing a sanctions analysis and providing that short, sweet recommendation. So a little less complex than the TM review, but also a little bit easier to download, a little bit easier just to verify right here that there was a name match, a date of birth match, a postal address match, a high match score, all the lists that were hit, and the actual recommendation and rationale associated with that, which is all, included in this narrative here. And then we'll go back and show the 314A agent. And this is similar. What's really looking, is this person on the list. So you can see here that, this particular example, we can see the names that matched and how similar they were. So they can say, Zoe Molina, Zoe Brooke Molina, partial match there, pretty close. Date of birth matches, even though the formats are different. This is a good example where LLMs perform well. It doesn't need to do an exact text match, it can confer. Same thing here, SSN, right? The formats aren't exactly right, but of course an LLM can pick this up. And so given that, SSN is such a strong match, their names are very close and the date of births match exactly, AI will, escalate for further review and calling those things out. And yeah, very simple to create new agents, assign them to different queues, and have them perform these different tasks and do the full write-up for you. That's really the kind of the brief preview I wanted to show today. And I'll go back here and share my screen. If anyone's interested in a broader demo of AI agent and kind of building this for them, feel free to scan this QR code. Of course, you can reach out to myself. I'm Tyler at Unit21.ai. You can reach out to Alex. We're happy to answer any questions. I'm going to go into the Q&A here. It looks like we just have 2 questions, and feel free to post some more. I'll just answer these briefly while this is up, and thanks everyone for coming. But yeah, can you provide examples of the level of effort that we needed for a dedicated resource to achieve 99% accuracy from initial configuration, launch, monitoring, and the first task in the wild? Yeah, I mean, it depends on the workflow. I would say the biggest thing is really to identify the use case that you want to do. As I showed kind of in the demo, something that is relatively easier, I think, is something like a sanctions analysis. So if you wanted to test that out, I actually think that using the core principles I talked through, it wouldn't be the most massive lift for your team to take on. Now there is, I think, a high benefit from using someone out of the box that's kind of done all this work for you and updates it. But I think depending on the use case, I'd really kind of start with one use case that either has high volume and kind of low complexity, which sanctions fits really well. The next question: as AI gets adopted and deployed more widely by FIs, aren't the bad actors and fraudsters also using AI more effectively? Yes, that is correct. Not to fearmonger anyone. Yes, absolutely. I think you're going to see a massive spike in scams. I do think this is an important, fight fire with fire moment to leverage AI to kind of handle these review volumes effectively, to better detect fraud and scams and things of that nature. But I actually think, the goal is things like the session today, collaboration, sharing what tactics are working, generally, how we put things together. That's why I really wanted to focus on the principles. So whether you work with Unit21 or another provider, you're equipped to start, being knowledgeable about this subject, start testing things out on your own, knowing the core principles that you want to pursue. But yeah, I do think it's definitely, we're in a moment where adopting AI, I think, is getting more and more critical. Okay, I got some, I think more questions. Yes. Do you allow for custom configuration on actual instructions? Yes. So actually, we're um, launching that early next week. I'll show a preview of it, which is essentially just giving the actual prompt to the agent of how exactly to do the write up. Essentially, what that'll looks like is write up a 3-sentence summary with a recommendation to start based on the following criteria. So, we have this out of the box, but now we're exposing this to clients to really configure exactly what you want the write-up to be. And actually, if you're a client of Unit21, this should launch next week.
Let me read more questions to you, so it's easier. We have a question that asks, can we communicate with the agent to add, change, remove things from its write-ups, or will it update accordingly or provide another summary?
Yeah, that was actually what I just showed. So that'll be the kind of that narrative instructions where you provide exactly what you want the write-up to be. And I think what's great about that is, you'll have different agents that have different write-ups and different instructions. So across your different workflows, the whole goal is, for each one of those, you'll have a different agent that does different things, that writes up things in different formats. So yeah, that's how that would work.
Alan is asking, it seems like the agent can perform OSINT functions. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, exactly. And we're using Google search for that.
Avner is asking, what is the average true positive ratio among your clients for alerts that resulted in detection of an actual money laundering case?
Yeah, that's a really good question. This is a little less focused on our AI agent. That's really just performing the reviews. But in general, I feel like industry trends of false positive rates or true positive rates can range from anywhere from 1% on the very worst case, but I have heard this to say like 20%. So it depends on how wide of a net you cast. At Unit21, how we try to increase true positive rates is having a dynamic rules engine that you can update at any point in time. So you can really filter out back test, forward test, prove you didn't miss anything, while also, not having a 1% true positive rate. So a little less focused on our AI agent, but I would say, can range from 1% to 20%. I haven't heard much higher than that on the AML side of things.
Michael is asking, are these included with our existing production instance, or they are additional purchase?
Yes, that's a great question. Michael, everything I just demoed is free to test right now. So we do charge for it separately, but we also just launched all these new things. So we want you all to test it. So feel free to, use it and abuse it. We'll keep you posted on, when we're going to start charging for it again. But for now, feel free to start testing.
And the last one we have is from Louise, who asks, as AI agent deployed and more widely used by financial institutions, the bad actors and the fraudsters using AI as well to be more effectively and perpetrate fraud faster. How do you keep up?
Yeah, I think I answered this one earlier, but I'll chime in again. I don't think don't be too afraid. I don't want to like fear monger folks, but I do think it is a really good time if you haven't already to educate yourself further on the topics we talked about. Testing with vendors, if you work with us, very easy to start testing this stuff, and really even just document the places that you want to use AI. What are you doing manually today? How can you help automate that task consistently? And I'd be happy to talk with you more about your specific use case, give advice, recommendations. But yeah, I do think it is, as I mentioned earlier, a fight fire with fire moment. I do think adopting AI will help scale and automate these things as fraud cases scale.
And we have a question from John, who asks, how would a manager oversee ongoing evaluations and metrics and overturn agent decisions to see where additional tuning is needed?
That's a really good question, John. Right now, we don't have agents actually closing alerts out. That will be our focus for our engineering team working on our product in September, October. So in the fall, And how we're thinking about it is providing observability metrics. So essentially, when an agent makes a recommendation or a decision, providing the option for the analyst to actually, correct a decision if it's incorrect, show those metrics of how correct is it, as it, produces its results. And when it is incorrect, enabling that analyst to provide feedback to the agent, which will then be incorporated into how it makes its decisions going forward. So generally, you're going to want to look at things like how correct is it versus your human analyst, and then have the ability to actually tune the decision logic from the agent based on that feedback, and continue to measure that. So, and of course, I think a good principle for us is having everything audited. So when you do actually tune the AI agent, having that audited, what tune did you make for what reason, etc.
We have a question from Tyler who's asking, are regulators comfortable with AI agents in fraud and AML space?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't want to speak for regulators, but we have, had a conversation with FinCEN, OCC, Department of California for Innovation in Financial Crimes, and we do have regular syncs with them. And I think consistently, what they say to me is they just want to see AI produce more effective reviews, as that seems to be the most common use case. So this is why it's a really high goal for us to have super high quality, focus not just on the efficiency, but also the effectiveness. And generally, if your human in the loop policy is good, meaning, if you don't have AI actually closing alerts out for you and just doing all the work, but you have a human verifying this, they're going to be comfortable. The more you have things automated, the more, kind of back to that question by John, you're going to want to have things in a nice, observability flow and QA/QC. So Unit21, just being in the space for quite some time, has a QA/QC product where you can do things like random sample, etc. So you can do that with our AI agent, confirming that you can do 100% random samples of all the decisions it makes. You could do 50%, when that launches. But I think the most important thing is to kind of document your policy, make sure you do have a human in the loop. If you do want AI to close things out, how are you going to actually, 2i review that to make sure it's correct, and then make this, make corrections if it is incorrect.
We have a technical question from Avner who's asking, how do you keep cost capped or reasonable while you depended fully on API calls to these external LLM vendors when processing high volume of transaction and alerts?
Yeah, it's a good question. For Unit21, we charge based off of review volume. So it's only the reviews that you send to us to do. So that's one way to cap it, is you can control, the volume that you want agents to review. If you're working directly with the foundation model providers like OpenAI, Anthropic, etc., what they charge typically is based off of tokens. So there's a concept of input tokens and output tokens. All that really means is, what text are you sending and what text is it returning, and how much is that? And then different models have different prices. So the mini models, as I mentioned earlier, are much cheaper. So if you have a simple task that can be performed with a mini model, you should do that, because it's actually going to save you like 10 to 100x your costs. So this is where the, back to the principles of prompting and eval sets allows you to really simply swap out the model and see, does it perform as well? If so, this is 10 times cheaper. So that's really how you control your costs, is, controlling your volumes, and then really, not using necessarily the latest and greatest model for every task, and, kind of measuring every time I do this, what's my token input and output? What are those costs? And then, projecting that over time. So, we do that here at Unit21.
And Shazin is asking how hard it is to integrate Unit21 and a financial institution with current systems. Well, I can take that. We see financial institutions go live with Unit21 as fast as 8 weeks, 10 weeks, even 12. It really depends on the current infrastructure and the current data flows that you have, and also how fast you will be able to do the mapping exercise. At the end of the day, when you integrate with Unit21, you have three major ways to integrate. One is on FFIP, which you will send us files every predefined time. It can be once a day, twice a day, whatever works for you. Or you can have an API integration where you basically integrate with Unit21's API and map all your data to Unit21. And we also have a real-time API, which allow you to send us transactions in real time and get a response if a certain set of transaction hits, again, a rule that you define, get a response as fast as 250 milliseconds, and take that response and decide what you want to do on your end, whether it's to block a card, freeze an account, or create any other friction for the end user. But integrating Unit21 is actually very easy, and compared to other vendors in the space, we are sitting much higher in terms of integration times. Well, folks, thank you for all the questions. I think this is all we have time for today. I would like to thank you all for listening and participating in this Q&A, and I hope we were able to show you a bit of what AI can do for your compliance and risk programs. I would like to thank you, Tyler, for explaining all those technical, scary terms. And I hope that folks here are now more comfortable and understand better what are LLMs, how AI agents can impact their day-to-day job. If you want to learn more about what Unit21 can offer for your risk and compliance teams in general, you're more than welcome to go to unit21.ai. We have a lot of resources there. We constantly create materials such as blogs and reports on every risk and compliance topic you can think of. So feel free to use unit21.ai as your research to learn more about the space. But we will see you all in our next webinar. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks all. Have a great day.